Hey, welcome back everybody. Happy Wednesday. Hope we're having a wonderful middle of the week out there. And we've got pretty active weather ongoing for a lot of folks really from now through the rest of this week with a couple storm systems likely to cross the country, and that first storm system already doing so and bringing some pretty impactful weather to a lot of folks up and down the eastern seaboard. But again, that's not all we have to worry about this week, as another powerful storm system kind of gets its act together starting really as early as tomorrow and slowly brings with it some severe weather and winter weather across much of the country. Now, if you haven't already subscribed, definitely consider doing so. Like the video if you like it, and of course, comment. Let me know where you're watching from and what you're seeing out in your neck of the woods here. And again, we'll kind of get on through this together. Now, with all that said, I think we can go ahead and start talking about the weather here. Actually, excuse me, I do want to mention a couple things. I will have a video out tomorrow. I'm not entirely sure if I'll have a video Friday or Saturday. I'm contemplating doing some storm chasing both days. In fact, it would probably involve an overnight trip. So, not entirely sure yet, but I do want to let you know ahead of time there is a chance I do skip out on Friday and Saturday, and I know it's kind of unfortunate I've skipped on a lot of days, but at least this is for meteorological activities, if you will. So again, I'll definitely keep you updated on that though, and let you know. With that said, though, let's go ahead and jump on into your forecast. And again, some very active conditions out there, and you can see that pretty well on satellite imagery here. You'll notice we've got a pretty good spin here of low pressure kind of over portions of Georgia and the Carolinas, just really bringing kind of a fire hose of moisture out of the Atlantic up through the mid-Atlantic and eventually into the Northeast by the time we get into overnight tonight and into tomorrow. Now, back west, we have another storm system kind of working into California here. This likely to eventually cross the Four Corners region and eject out of the Rockies and bring the potential of a couple rounds of severe weather, again starting Thursday out into Texas and Oklahoma, Friday getting into the Gulf, and then Saturday potentially into the southeast coastline. So again, a couple days of severe weather as well as some snow potential on the northern side of this thing here up through the Northeast and into the Midwest. Now, taking a look at current radar imagery, again, most of the active weather that we're seeing, at least in terms of rainfall, is through much of the East Coast, from eastern Tennessee through the Carolinas, northbound up into the New England area. And in fact, we actually have some flood watches in effect here from coastal Maine, New Hampshire, down through a big portion of Massachusetts, Long Island into Connecticut, Rhode Island, and even northeastern New Jersey. As again, a lot of moisture and precipitation on the way here could potentially lead to some flooding, and you can already see again that big shield of rain here that I just mentioned on your map. And again, that likely to slowly but surely kind of pull off towards the north and east throughout the next 24 to 48 hours. Now, I will quickly mention, and unfortunately I did not touch on this really all that much in yesterday's video, but we do have a small low pressure system working on through North Dakota. That has brought some snow and will continue to bring some snow into the northern periphery of North Dakota and even likely up into the Winnipeg area of Canada here throughout the next 24 hours or so. So just thought I should briefly mention that. And then back out west, again, much more quiet compared to what we were seeing this time a week ago, but nonetheless, a storm system is slowly working through California, bringing some rain and some high elevation snowfall before eventually again getting out into the central plains, and that's when it could dump some big time snow on the higher terrains of the Rockies throughout much of Colorado within the next couple of days. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the overall setup here. Again, we've got two storms to worry about. So if we look at our relative vorticity map, we can see them pretty well showing up here. We've got a trough over the southeast right now, and you'll notice that trough axis kind of drawn out on your map there. This is what is leading to all that rain up and down the east coast right now. You'll notice we've got some vorticity here, some spin, and we saw that with low pressure on the map. Now, the other area that we are watching is back into California. Again, another trough, a pretty impressive vorticity lobe here showing up on this map. And as we move this ahead throughout the next couple of days, again, you'll notice that East Coast energy slowly rides up the coast. And by the time we're getting into Thursday afternoon, our trough out here is now kind of moving pretty well up into Canada and bringing, again, some impactful weather up through New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. But then all eyes turn to our next storm system. And again, we've got a very big trough here kind of dipping well down into the Four Corners, even into northern Mexico. And that is going to allow some low pressure to form here, again, through portions of Texas and Oklahoma for our Thursday and Friday. And you'll notice that showing up here on your map, again, right kind of into the panhandle of those states. So definitely watch into that. Now, as we move this further ahead into time, this same trough will slowly work eastbound and eventually kind of hook up with some energy up into Canada. And you'll notice here we go, we're getting a very impressive drop in our isobars here all the way down into the Midwest. And this, again, will be low pressure that forms and gets quite strong and eventually kind of connects to that cold air up north and could bring some winter weather through the Northeast into the Great Lakes region, and also some severe weather kind of in the circled area on your map here along the Gulf Coast states, starting again really Friday and going into our Saturday before finally this eventually kind of occludes a little bit and really drags a good amount of cold air down into the Northeast. But nonetheless, the severe weather threat dies down, and eventually into early next week, the winter weather threat dies down a little bit as well. All right, now starting today, again, we do actually have a couple areas of severe weather potential. One back into kind of the heart of Texas here from Dallas, Fort Worth, kind of westbound there along the I-20 corridor. I think that's I-20 in Texas at least. I might have gotten that wrong, but either way, actually might be no, this is I-10 down here. I think that might be I-20 if I follow it all the way back. I think so. Anyway, there's going to be some storms there into the heart of Texas throughout much of this afternoon with, the chance of becoming strong to severe. Only a marginal risk today, but still worth mentioning. Also a marginal risk down into Florida, kind of into Lake Okeechobee and through much of the East Coast, from kind of Cape Canaveral south through Miami, where again some strong gusty winds and maybe a brief isolated tornado is not out of the question there. Another place we could see some strong storms into the Midlands and low country of South Carolina this afternoon. Again, the main threats I think will be strong straight line winds definitely, as well as a couple isolated tornadoes are not out of the question, but really straight line winds, maybe even a little bit of hail, not out of the question into South Carolina today. And I'm actually going to be out there chasing, probably going to leave right about the time y'all are watching this. So again, going to be an interesting day for a lot of folks here in the severe weather department. All right, let's take a look now at kind of the next 48 hours through the East Coast, get you through the rest of this ongoing storm system, and then we'll break down that next storm system region by region, threat by threat for you before I let you get on with the rest of your day. So here we go. Again, this afternoon, the real story will honestly be just the rainfall. But again, as I mentioned, we could see some strong storms in a couple places. Now, again, I'm going to quickly recircle those areas that we could see some strong storms and just kind of watch radar imagery throughout these areas throughout the day today, specifically, obviously, if you live in those circled areas I just showed you. But again, going into this afternoon, here are some of those storms into South Carolina and Florida. You'll notice kind of crossing in from the Gulf through the Fort Myers area, and then again kind of through the southern half of Florida, through Lake Okeechobee, over towards Miami. Again, some of these storms could become feisty. At the same time, you'll notice on the backside of this low pressure, enough kind of lift and cape initialize here, if you will, through much of the Augusta area, down through Columbia, even towards Savannah, and we get some storms to kind of fire along that front there, and again could lead to some pretty beautiful storms, I think, as well as some gusty straight line winds, maybe a brief isolated tornado, but that threat, again, pretty low here in South Carolina, and maybe some small hail as well. Now, going later on into time here, you'll notice, again, here's all of that rain. Now, really stretching up into the northeast, raining heavy from Maine all the way down the I-95 corridor through New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Virginia, into West Virginia, and even portions of North Carolina, really getting in on that rainfall. But I want you to note this area right here. This is, again, kind of a fire hose of moisture, as we often like to call it, kind of moving up the Gulf Stream and into the northeast, and that's why we have those flood watches. Places like Long Island, northern New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and surrounding areas really could, unfortunately, get a good amount of rain out of this overnight tonight and into tomorrow. Now, at the same time, again, you'll notice a couple storms trying to fire off into Texas. Can't rule out a couple of those turning strong to severe as well, with really straight line winds being the main threat. Now, moving this further into tonight, getting into about the 2 a.m. time frame here, East Coast time, and you'll notice most of the severe weather threats are dying down at this point through the Carolinas and Florida, but still a lot of very heavy rain falling into much of the Northeast, and at the same time, we're changing over to some snow here into the northern half of Maine, specifically really northern Maine here, kind of near the Canadian border, and then the surrounding areas of Canada as well. They're getting in on some of that snow. Now, waking up tomorrow morning about 7 to 8 a.m., it's still raining into southeastern New England from Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and again, all the way down even into the Hudson River Valley, seeing some rain, as well as up into Vermont and New Hampshire. So again, need to watch for some flooding concerns there, but at the same time, still dealing with some snow. That snow line trying to crash southward a little bit through much of Maine, and eventually That storm system finally works on through tomorrow afternoon, and we should dry out by the time we're getting into tomorrow evening from the snow and the rain up in the northeast. But at the same time, here comes our next storm system knocking on the door. All right, quickly talking about snowfall totals out of the first storm system here. Again, northern Maine going to be the real winners here. 1 to 3 inches of snow is going to be pretty widespread, but isolated spots could get 3 to 5 inches, not out of the question. So again, we're getting pretty good into March here, kind of ending out the first week here, but still pretty common to see snow up in this part of the country during this time of the year. And some of it definitely on the way overnight tonight and into tomorrow. Now, we've talked about the freezing rain threat a little bit here. It looks to have calmed down a little bit. This forecast is straight from the National Weather Service, and the experts up here, I'm sure, know a lot more than probably I do, which is, definitely a good thing for them, and probably myself as well. But either way, again, some ice still possible here, especially in those higher elevations of northern Vermont, northern New York, into New Hampshire, and then again along the Canadian border there. Maybe upwards of 1/10 of an inch, but really a glaze more likely, if anything, here for most folks in these areas. Now, rainfall, again, a lot of it on the way, especially into southeastern New England here and even into the Outer Banks of North Carolina, where 3 inches of rain is not out of the question for a lot of folks here, but widespread 2 to 4 inches, again, through those areas with lesser totals the further inland you get and the further west where some of that rain is already tapered off a little bit. And again, this is just over the next 48 hours. So, again, even more rain likely on the way, including later this week's system that is likely to work on through as well. And speaking of that system, let's go ahead and talk about it a little bit. So starting really tomorrow, this storm is likely to get its act together and start causing some problems. In fact, we've got a slight risk of severe weather tomorrow afternoon from Dallas-Fort Worth up the Red River Valley here into portions of Oklahoma and even down south towards the Austin area. Again, could see some strong storms out of this tomorrow. And we'll definitely be watching that. And then going into our, I'm going to do some math here, Friday as well, another area of severe weather, this time kind of further down towards the Gulf of Mexico from Louisiana, East Texas, southern Mississippi, the Florida Panhandle, and into southern Alabama, and even northbound into Jackson, Birmingham, Little Rock. Some of these other areas in the kind of green on your map could also see strong to severe storms. So we'll have to watch that. Again, all threats on the table here, but especially some strong straight line winds and a couple isolated tornadoes not out of the question for both of these days. All right, let's time this out a little bit here. We'll start tomorrow morning. So 8 a.m., again, here we go. Here's that low pressure now getting its act together. And again, that threat of severe weather was kind of in this circled area on your map tomorrow. So kind of watch what happens here throughout the day tomorrow. Definitely starting with some rain in Little Rock into southern Oklahoma, northern Texas, and then into the Kansas and Missouri area. Could definitely see some rain tomorrow afternoon. But it's going later on into tomorrow afternoon that some of those storms begin to fire and get a little bit more feisty here. So this is about 4, 5, 6 o'clock local time. And you'll notice, again, still just some good old-fashioned rain from kind of Little Rock up into much of Missouri and Kansas. Likely not expecting a severe weather threat there. But where some of these storms are able to form a little bit closer to the low pressure and where some more instability is kind of building, again, could definitely see some strong storms here. And once again, going into the evening hours, you'll notice some of these stronger storms are kind of developing up into portions of Oklahoma and then again through the Red River Valley. So we'll be watching that for our Thursday afternoon and overnight Thursday as well. Now, by the time we're getting into Friday morning, you'll notice here comes that low pressure really developing quite a bit stronger. And at the same time, we've got snow breaking out through the mountains of Colorado, New Mexico, and once again, some strong storms developing ahead of this line of storms Friday morning. And again, this will slowly work eastbound throughout the day Friday, and I think Friday will likely be probably the peak of the severe weather threat this week. So we'll be watching that, again, in that area I showed you. But nonetheless, even tomorrow could see some strong storms. But really, again, I think Friday is going to be the peak of this system. Now that's as far out as our mesoscale model goes here, so we're going to switch back to our global models, and again, shows this threat pretty good Friday afternoon as well. Again, I think some snow showers back through Colorado and New Mexico, maybe even throughout portions of Kansas and Nebraska. But that severe weather threat, again, notice some of these stronger storms potentially firing up through East Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, where we're kind of in that warm sector. So we've kind of got a warm front here and a cold front here, and anywhere kind of in between the two is where we're going to see that severe weather threat throughout the day Friday afternoon, and again, potentially even into Friday evening before I think we're waking up Saturday morning and getting into Saturday afternoon, and things are much more quiet through the South Central Plains, and we can look forward to a much nicer weekend for a lot of folks. All right, severe weather, once again, a threat on Saturday. Again, I'll probably be storm chasing this one. And again, right now, Storm Prediction Center outlining areas from the Florida Panhandle up through southern Georgia, kind of from Macon down through Savannah into Jacksonville, Destin, Pensacola, Mexico Beach. And I'm sure I could name plenty more cities in the Florida Panhandle, but nonetheless, you get the point here. A lot of places under the gun for severe weather again on Saturday, and that could potentially include the threat of maybe a tornado or two, not out of the question. So let's go ahead and time this out a little bit. Now, we'll pick this up on Friday afternoon. As I mentioned, here's that potential line of strong to severe storms back into Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, slowly working eastbound. Now, anyone kind of north of this line, or I'll just circle it, I guess, anyone in that area, not likely a severe weather threat with this storm system, but a rain threat nonetheless. So definitely could disrupt your plans here for our Friday afternoon from Nashville through Louisville, Little Rock, northbound through Missouri, into the Ohio River Valley as well. Likely to see some rain out of this. Now here we go, Friday evening. Once again, watch this area for some strong storms through Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and the Florida Panhandle. And again, just rain to the north of there before eventually we're getting into Saturday morning here, and we've got more thunder and lightning kind of rolling on through with some heavy rain showers through Atlanta, through Columbia, Charlotte, Greenville, Spartanburg, Fayetteville could get on some heavy rain before eventually Saturday afternoon. Again, I think the atmosphere kind of rejuvenates a little bit, and look at this, another line of feisty storms with potentially maybe a couple of strong areas of rotation, maybe a tornado or two not out of the question here. Saturday afternoon and evening, again, maybe as far north and east as the Carolina coastline, but definitely down, I think, through southern Georgia and into the Florida Panhandle. We'll be watching that before eventually that clears on overnight Saturday, and by the time we're waking up Sunday morning, much nicer conditions overtake us, with definitely some cooler, drier air in store for a lot of folks. But nonetheless, just in general, a much nicer day going into Sunday and into that Monday as well. All right, let's take a look now at the north central plains. Now we're going to be changing from a kind of severe weather threat to more of a winter weather threat, as well as just some good old-fashioned rain. But we'll go ahead and time this out a little bit. So starting Thursday afternoon, you'll notice some precipitation slowly working on in through kind of Nebraska before eventually overnight Thursday into Friday, that low pressure kind of slugs a big area of moisture northward. Could see some rain through Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, even into Wisconsin, while maybe some snow tries to break out on kind of the colder backside of this storm system here through portions of Nebraska through our overnight Thursday and into Friday. Now moving this further ahead into our Friday afternoon and Friday evening, again, just a lot of rain on the way here through much of the Midwest, through Michigan and into the Ohio River Valley, even into Wisconsin. But watch out on the north side here, I think specifically through the UP of Michigan and into northern Wisconsin, could see some snow out of this for sure as well. Definitely some colder air going to funnel on in here and maybe change some of that rain to some wintry weather here overnight Friday into Saturday before eventually the low pressure system itself really strengthens, moves up through the region, and you'll notice here it is, 995 millibars, could again bring maybe a change over to snow on that colder side of things, especially if we get some kind of dynamic cooling to occur or anything that might help cool temperatures down. Definitely could see the crashing of the column, if you will, from that heavy rain to maybe some big wet snowflakes on the backside of this thing going into our afternoon. On Saturday into the evening, you'll notice that heavy snow really picking up on the backside through Detroit, maybe even down into portions of Ohio, before eventually this storm system really pulls away and nicer conditions kind of overtake much of the Midwest outside of some lake effect snow on the backside here on the far end of your screen. But nonetheless, much nicer Sunday and Monday in store as well through many of these areas. All right, let's talk snow totals now. Again, we've been talking about a whole bunch of things. Snow is up next on the list here. And again, snowfall, I think we're going to have a lot of winners here through much of the mountains of Colorado. So if you have any skiing trips planned out in this part of the country, congratulations, you're in luck. Maybe half a foot to a foot of snow, pretty widespread, again, through many of these resorts through Colorado. But we could even see snow outside of the mountains. You'll notice here into portions of Nebraska, down into the lower terrains of eastern Colorado and into western Kansas. 1 to 3 inches of snow not out of the question here for a lot of folks as we kind of get that band of snow on the northern side of this low pressure. So again, definitely watching out for that before eventually a storm system moves on into the northeast and as I mentioned, into the Midwest. And as I mentioned, we could get some snow on the backside as well here. And as I kind of showed you earlier, we could also see some higher totals into the UP of Michigan. I think also potentially into northern Michigan kind of itself here, and then also into portions of Wisconsin. Overall, 1 to 3 inches of snow through through many of these communities, but isolated spots of maybe 3 to 5 inches, maybe even half a foot of snow through portions of the UP of Michigan, especially kind of on the northern side of the UP here, right along the Great Lakes. So again, definitely notable amounts of snow on the way through some of these regions. All right, now let's talk about the Northeast. I'm going to show you multiple models here for the Northeast just because we're kind of getting far enough out at this point, and we're not really in mesoscale range. We're still in global model range, and there's still some pretty big differences between the two. So I'll start with the GFS here, show you what that's showing, and then we'll get on into the European and talk about some of the differences and some of the possibilities here with this snowstorm coming up into this weekend. All right, we'll start here. This is Friday afternoon, latest GFS model. Again, kind of is a bit different than the European and really in the track of the low pressure itself. So you'll notice this is getting well into Saturday afternoon and evening, and the location of our low pressure is kind of right along Lake Erie, riding the coast there of Ohio and Pennsylvania. And because of that, we're getting some pretty big warm air advection northward. That kind of warm front, and you'll notice here is really pulling up a lot of warm air, and maybe warm air isn't the right word to use, but above freezing kind of air. So we're getting just a lot of rain through much of the Northeast with this sort of model output. And, granted, we are seeing some snow here into the higher terrains of New York, from the Catskills kind of up into the Adirondacks, but overall, still the placement of this low pressure is not very favorable for snow. And you'll notice eventually what happens, though, is this low pressure begins to occlude a little bit here over the weekend, just meaning cold air kind of wraps all the way around and changes a lot of this rain to snow as this turns into just an upper level low with a pocket of cold air. Specifically, really a good amount of lake effect snow here on our operational GFS run, with also some snow mixing in to the higher terrains of interior New England. But overall, more rain than anything, and this low pressure kind of just hangs around a little bit and then brings more widespread snow showers on the backside through overnight Sunday and into Monday afternoon before finally clearing on out about a week or so out from now. Now, that's the GFS. What about the European? Well, a pretty big difference here in the placement of our low pressure. Again, as I mentioned, the GFS was kind of up here with the low pressure. The European tracking much further south here over portions of West Virginia, and thus we're getting more snowy and wintry precipitation on the front end here as cold air is still in place, and that low pressure isn't quite able to advect enough warm air northward. But eventually what happens here is this low pressure, again, takes a much further south track kind of over the I-95 corridor, and because of that, we're snow for most of this event through upstate New York into Vermont, New Hampshire, and into Maine. And again, this could be very heavy, wet snow and could last for a good 24 to 48 hours through many communities here. Into these areas. Even into Sunday afternoon, still snowing good here into the interior Northeast. Now, again, either way, we're going to get rain along the I-95 corridor. But again, these higher terrains further inland could see a pretty good snowstorm out of this, especially if this were to verify on the European. And as well as the GFS shows back in lake effect snow showers, pretty likely here either way, I think, before again kind of tampering on down by the time we get into next Tuesday or Wednesday. All right, let me show you some snowfall outputs for some of our models. I'll show you the GFS ensembles, and I want you to take these totals with a grain of salt, kind of maybe subtract a couple inches from them. But either way, you'll notice the general bullseye area is well into the interior Northeast, kind of from Lake Erie into Cleveland, into Erie itself, back into Buffalo, then up into the Adirondacks, and then into the mountains of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine itself. A pretty good total showing up here, but a pretty good swath of snow nonetheless. Now, if I show you the European ensemble members, you'll notice a much bigger bullseye and also more of kind of a straight line cutoff here into portions of Massachusetts and then up into Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. So, again, this is because of the difference in that low pressure track, we're getting different swaths of snow. Now, I don't think, 20 inches of snow is going to fall here into Maine out of this, but I do think with a general track like the European shows, a good half a foot to a foot of snow is not out of the question into the higher terrains, again, from the Adirondacks through Vermont, New Hampshire, and then into Maine. Now, what I'm not buying here is this down here. You'll see, 3 to 5 inches of snow into Boston, Providence, and Hartford. Definitely not buying that. This is definitely going to be a much further inland snow event, especially once we get kind of this late in the year. But again, could nonetheless see some big time snow totals into the interior Northeast, as well as I do think back towards Erie, Buffalo, and maybe Cleveland could get some pretty good lake effect snow out of this as well. So we will definitely be watching that. All right, temperatures, again, something I'm sure a lot of you care about. Here we go. This afternoon, you'll notice still pretty well above average for a lot of folks, and those warmer temperatures will hang around through this weekend. This is Thursday afternoon, still above average for a lot of folks in the east. Friday afternoon, more up the same. Saturday afternoon, you'll notice we kind of start to get a bit of a front showing up here with some cooler temperatures kind of diving down south into Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, and Louisiana. And that kind of continues throughout this weekend, slowly to work inbound. And again, I think Sunday afternoon, cooler, drier air sweeps on into the east. How long will it last, though? I don't think very long at all. I think by the time we get into next week, especially starting really Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday afternoon, once again, well above average temperatures overtaking much of the country, and that could last for a while. Now, what is likely to change, I think, though, is about 10 to 15 days from now. And I know that's a very long ways away, but our models have been very strong in hinting at the fact that we could get a very big-time trough to kind of work on into the eastern United States. And should this happen, much cooler than average temperatures likely to funnel in. Maybe even a pretty strong low pressure could form out of this as well. That could bring potentially some severe weather for somebody and some winter weather for somebody else. Again, by this point, getting pretty late into March and thus pretty far into severe weather season here. So definitely be watching that in the long run, but again, we've got plenty to get through kind of in the short range before we focus too much on what is further on down the horizon. Alrighty. Again, talked about a lot today. Hopefully you found some use in it. Pretty long video with, I think, a lot of information that, again, if you did find useful, definitely subscribe, like the video if you like it, and consider sharing it with somebody that you might think will enjoy it. I will also mention, I apologize, I have not been super active in the comments recently. I will try to do better. It's really, I'm not sure why I haven't, but I definitely need to do better. So I will definitely, be a little more active now. Either way, I do read them all. I promise you that. Just a matter of if I'm responding or not. But I'll definitely try to be a little more responsive. And again, I know you folks are kind of what is the heartbeat of this channel, and I should probably respect that a little bit more by talking to you some more. So either way, though, I do appreciate all of you hanging around, watching the video. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all tomorrow.